Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And welcome to another author interview. Now, my guest today grew up on the south coast of England near Bournemouth. He lost his father when he was 5 and was brought up by his mother, who then secured his education at Reed School in Surrey. I hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. At 21, he joined the Metropolitan Police Service, serving for 30 years in various roles and departments. However, he regards his time at Battersea Police Station as his most enjoyable job time. Since retirement, my guest has worked as a document collection and stating agent. He has been a driver for several driving agencies and private clients. He is married to Paula after having lived in Sussex for many years. And together they decided to embark on a new journey together in 2023. In July of that year, they moved to a small village in Dordogne, France. And the time is now spent between tending to large gardens, supporting one another and their businesses, and finding time to write. Now, my guest's interests are many and varied. He plays hockey for many years for the police and then for Crowborough Hockey Club, where he met his lovely wife. And my guest enjoys the outdoors, mainly walking for far across the South Downs and the numerous bouclés in France. I apologize, I butchered that. French is not my best. And he collects stamps and Scottish Malt whisky. He is a keen motorcyclist and is easy to now tear around the highways and byways of Europe. And as I've mentioned, he has many works in the process and a huge pipeline of works upcoming and ones he is eager to share with us. So let's give a huge round of applause to our guest all the way in France, Guy Robbins. Guy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Gabriel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome, Guy. Awesome. We're so happy to have you on the show. Now, before we begin the questions about you as an author and your works, is there anything else you would like to add about your background?
I suppose it's mainly the police. I've certainly drawn some of the experiences in the police for my first novel, and one of my next publication will be a reflection on that as it deals with my first 9 years in the police. So that's something to look forward to when I publish that, probably around Christmas time. I'm looking to get that out.
Nice, very nice. So let's start at the very beginning. When would you say is the moment you decided that you want to get your hand in writing, and just walk us through the process of that?
So we all went through the COVID pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
we in various countries had the various levels of restrictions that were put upon us. And in England, it was very much a case of there wasn't a great deal to do. I ran out of Lego to build, jigsaw puzzles to finish. And one afternoon, I just sat down at my desk and thought, it'd be quite good fun to write a story about this. And I was inspired by the pandemic itself to take
Okay.
the pandemic as it was, and then just tweak it a little bit and just push it into a slightly dystopian world. What might have happened had the restrictions perhaps been a bit more strict. And
Ooh.
within a year of starting it, I was in a position to publish my debut novel in 2022, which was, let me find it for you, folks, Dysfunction, which came out in March of 2022. And as I say, it's a story of a couple who find themselves on holiday on a remote island in Scotland, and suddenly the restrictions become much more than they had been, and they pretty much have to fend for themselves, and various challenges and adventures are put in front of them, and we follow their journey as the book unfolds.
Wow, that's actually really, really fascinating. To be brutally honest, I have never read like a very, very good thriller or suspense novel, so I'm really eager and really intrigued by that. And what about your other stories that you've worked on, Guy? What can you tell us about those, especially the ones that talk about your time in the police?
So let's put it in order.
Okay.
So my latest publication, which is called Indomitable, I have a copy of that too for you.
Ooh, I like it.
I switched genres. I went from a dystopian novel, and this Indomitable is a historical fiction, and it came out in February of this year.
Okay.
About a month it's been up on Amazon now, and it basically is the story of my grandfather. Now, my grandfather,
Oh.
he came from Germany, and in 1899 he emigrated from Germany to the United Kingdom, to Great Britain, and he then went back to Germany to do his national service in the Imperial German Navy, and then
Wow.
came back to England again just in time to be interned as a German at the outbreak of the First World War.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done is I've woven a story that deals very much with his life, but I've put in a lot of real events, real characters, and I've woven them into the tapestry of the story so that you get a feel for the fact that this man kept having things thrown at him and the adversity that he faced. He, for example, went to the Isle of Man internment camp at the time that his wife, who was English, was heavily pregnant with their first child, and he didn't see his first until she was nearly 5.
Wow.
And then the irony, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but the irony,
Right.
it took him the best part of 35 years to gain ultimately his British citizenship, and he had to go through a number of processes and problems. He became a great success, but I'd be giving too much away if I said more about it. But he led a very interesting and fruitful life. But the story, I suppose I've used a little bit of artistic license. I have him meeting and encountering world-renowned figures of the time. So we're
Right.
talking 1900 through to about 1955 is the period of time that the story takes. There's parts where he comes to the United States. I don't know whether you and your readers would be aware of this, but you've heard of Pilates, the exercise.
I believe so. Yes.
Madonna made it very famous and was a follower, an avid follower, and brought it back to sort of the public consciousness. Joseph Pilates was a German who was also interned on the Isle of Man during the duration of the First World War.
Really?
At the end of the First World War, he was repatriated to Germany, and then he decided to emigrate to the United States, where he set up his first studio in New York. And he's woven into the story at some stage, because obviously he would have been in the same place as my grandfather, the main character, Carl. And so I've used that very much to give it a more international feel. And make it more appealing, perhaps, to a worldwide audience. Because and ultimately, it's if you think about the problems we have today, and maybe some of the leaders that we have today, it points to very much that we kind of repeat ourselves. So here we were in the 1800s with a capricious leader, the Kaiser, at the start of the First World War, making so many mistakes and rubbing up people the wrong way. And then we get to see a very young Adolf Hitler and his rise to prominence in the late 1920s into the 1930s. And how maybe it was the world's fault that they punished Germany too severely at the end of the war. And it left that vacuum of power for people like Hitler to come to prominence. And then we're off and running, and we know what happened then. So I think there's a lot in there, albeit it's a historical piece. I think there's an awful lot in there that deals with, if you think about how things are today, with the various people that we see in power today, you think, well, we're just repeating ourselves. But it's enjoyable. There's something for everybody. There's a little bit of romance in there. There's adventure. There's a story. There's history for people that enjoy that. I'm very proud of it, and I feel it's a real development. Don't get me wrong. I think Dysfunction, my first novel, I'm very proud of that too. But I think I've warmed to the role. I've warmed up now.
Right.
And feel that I'm just getting into my stride, and I'm very much looking forward to what comes next, because I feel much more. I don't know whether other authors go through this, but there was a degree of imposter syndrome when I first, and you sort of felt, wow, who am I to publish a novel? This police officer from London who suddenly wants to write books. But now I feel, well, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And you just have to have the faith and the resilience, the motivation, and you can do it. And I feel it's it's something that I will continue to do. And I look forward. I'm not a young man. I'm just turning 59 this month. And
Really? Okay.
thank you very much. And I look forward to sort of putting out books now as I go through sort of my retirement years, and in between bouts of gardening and roaring around on a motorbike, and Paula and I enjoying lots of fun and frolics around Europe. Obviously, I'll be able to build in a bit of time to keep pushing out books on subjects that affect me at the time. I don't stick to a genre. I write about what I want to write about next. And as I've said to you at the start, my next piece will be a true life account of my first 9 years in the police in London. Walking the beat on those streets
Right.
of South London, Battersea, my police station, which was where I was based, south of the River Thames. And it deals with my formative years in the police service, when I was 20 years of age when I first walked out of the station on my first foot patrol. Very young, 3 years out of school, and you're out there, and a British police officer. You're not armed. You're armed solely with a little wooden truncheon, a whisky, notebook, and a radio, and that's about it. And you had to learn pretty quickly. So I look forward to bringing that to publication. As I said, I look forward to getting that out for the Christmas period. That would be my ideal time, I think. This one.
Fascinating. So, pretty much like you said, like you don't stick to one genre. You like tackle like everything, which is incredible. Congratulations on your success thus far. So now, when writing your books, what would you say is sort of like the need or desire you want to satisfy for your readers?
Well, I want them to be entertained. I've always felt when I read books as a boy growing up that you wanted somehow a book to give you that, however long you were reading it, a couple of hours of distraction, a diversion perhaps from your life. And I feel if I can entertain, possibly educate,
Yes.
people understand things, or see things that they weren't aware of, or bring things to their attention that they weren't aware of. That's, I suppose, what I'm mainly trying to do, just to give them that feeling of diversion, the feeling of you're taken somewhere, you're taken on a journey. A couple of people have been kind enough to review my work and say that I write page turners, and people pick them up and they enjoy them, and they want to know what happens next, and they keep going with them, which is very, very gratifying to hear. So that's lovely.
That I 100% agree, Guy. There's nothing better than getting lost in a really good book, and just it is as you said, a good book is an escape from reality. It takes you to a different world, and you live a different life through the character, or you see these different characters play in your mind, and that is always the best thing. And kind of leading into that, whenever you write a different story for a different genre, be it dystopian, thriller, or historical fiction, what is your promise to your reader? Is it a general promise for all three types of books or genres, or is it a different promise for every specific book?
It's probably a different promise. I think it's the dystopian. I think it's the promise of taking you somewhere where you may not have expected to go. Using your imagination to see what me as the author has decided could have happened.
Right.
Certain circumstances of my first book. With regard to Indomitable, the historical fiction, I think I want people to empathise with a man's situation who never really feels he fits in. He feels alienated in his homeland of Germany, but he also doesn't feel comfortable and accepted in his adopted home of Great Britain. And I want there to be an understanding. So I suppose it's more of an education with that one, and maybe a period in history that's not as familiar to some people as other periods in history. I did an awful lot of research because myself, I wasn't as au fait with the period of time between the two world wars and that sort of vacuum that occurred across a lot of Europe and led to very much the Second World War. It was almost inevitable going to happen, because it was almost as if parts of Europe had allowed this situation in Germany to develop without really having maybe the willingness or the desire to sort of put any more restrictions, because they wanted to avoid conflict, any possibility of conflict at all costs. But that in itself led to an even greater conflict. So yeah, education. Going forward with future work, I suppose more understanding. If I wrote the true life account of my time in the police service in the first few years, it's warts and all, because there's candid moments, there are very very dark and disturbing moments. It's basically what the situation was. I've lost your picture, Gabriel. Are you still there?
Oh, I'm still here, guy. I'm still here. It's just the connection. You're all good.
Yeah, I feel I didn't shy away from what occurred and the stories. Some of them are quite amusing because, as in life, some of the things that you get up to are naturally funny. But there's also the dark side and the difficult side of being in law enforcement. And I've tried to do it in a very different way. So I'm wondering if the way I've done it is I've created poems that lead you into the chapter, and you get a poem at the outset, and then you get the description that puts the flesh on the bones of the poem, if you see what I mean. So it's quite a hybrid style of writing. I've never written poetry before, and I had the confidence and the sort of thought processes that I could write poems about. It's short, pithy, sort of 4-line, 5-verse stanzas that would give the reader a chance to see what that particular facet of the role that he's talking about, and then you turn over to read the chapter, which puts a bit more of the flesh onto what I was trying to say. And I think there's 20 poems that we'll be putting out, and then the stories that go in with that. And as I was writing it, obviously, you write a true life account, you're suddenly remembering things. We're talking 30 years ago, so some things aren't as fresh in my mind as perhaps they could be. But yeah, I'm excited by it. We're currently proofreading. I say we. My good lady wife Paula is my first go-to proofreader. We'll do another couple of proofreads before we send it out for somebody else, an independent proofread, and then we're probably in a position to know where we're at. I've got some decisions to make. I am an independent author, but I may seek to get representation. But I've got to be honest with you, now that I've got a more realistic take on the industry, I'm quite happy to stay and fly the flag for the independent and support other independent authors and be the flag bearer. Success is if one person picks up my book, reads it, and another person or the same person has the decency to write a review, irrespective of what they say.
Right.
Someone takes the time and trouble to review your work. That is incredibly satisfying. And as I say, even if it's incredibly critical, the fact they've taken the time and trouble to write something, to me as an independent author, that means the world. And I think most authors would certainly echo that, I'm sure.
I 100% agree. And that actually kind of leads beautifully into the next question, Guy. So, when you actually began writing your first book, as you probably would agree, it is a very lonely venture because it is a very private endeavor to create a book, create a passion project that you probably worked years on, editing, proofreading, finding a cover artist, finding a printing shop to get it like all fitted, and then having it go out into the world, and then fingers crossed that it actually gets a good, decent fare of exposure. And you probably mentioned this before about the initial reviews for your books. What was probably the one review that probably stands out the most when you just got started as an author? And what was that feeling like, seeing that first review, that first feedback for one of your stories?
Well, it was a surprise for starters. But then you sit down and read and analyze what that person had said, and you think, wow, somebody, as I've said, has bought my book, they've invested in it, they've read it, they then sat down and penned about a paragraph of describing how it made them feel and the positivity surrounding the story itself. They were complimentary about the language, the fact that my characters had depth, and they felt that they were real characters. I think they were aware that I had a services background, a law enforcement background, because obviously my knowledge, certainly within the first book, there's quite a lot of weaponry that's described.
Right.
I got that to hand because of my previous experience, work experience. And I think it was the independence of that person from me. We're talking a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Had found this book that I'd written, he'd read it, and then he'd taken, as I say, the time and the trouble and the effort to compliment me about the book and recommend it to other people. And yeah, that's a real feeling of you certainly pop a champagne cork on the strength of that. I'll say that for free. That was a real moment, a real sort of sit down. Yeah, I can do this. And that's not to say if I hadn't got the reviews, it would have changed anything. I think I see the writing very much as a hobby, but it's more than a hobby. It's as I've said, I've lived a life, and it's really, really good for my mental health. It's something different to sit down at a desk and take yourself somewhere and let your mind create something new. And I think it's really important. And I think, it's not for everybody, but I think anybody can do it. And I just feel that I've just understood the process, and now I understand the industry, and I'm at one with the industry and where I fit into it. And I have no expectations. I have no grandiose, I'm going to be the Sunday Times or the New York Times bestseller.
Right.
I'm just happy ploughing my own path and finding an audience and building my audience with kind interviews like this one, social media, because as an independent, that's pretty much all you've got. And you seek these things out and you engage with people like yourself, Gabriel, and you find that you're not any different to anybody else. And I think that's reassuring. You find yourself, yeah, we're all like this. We're all doing this. We're all pushing our work, but we're all also supporting. And the positivity I find, yeah, there's one or two people that you think, well, okay, they're entitled to their opinion, but I can move on from that. But the vast majority, it's really positive, and I think that's encouraging, especially in the world we live.
Yes, I 100% agree. And you bring up some really, really powerful points, Sky. I really, really enjoy it. And it kind of makes me think of like how I'm going to answer the last question in the interview, because you pretty much have answered it, but we're going to try to get to that at the very end. But my next question to you is probably one that I've always find very interesting. So for you, Guy, who would you say are the authors that have really inspired your authorial voice and how you write? Because I definitely think you agree that whatever job field you go into, you always want to research the people in that field, in that industry, see how they approach the work. Same for authors. Like if you want to be an historical fiction author and you want to write a certain style, you would look up well-renowned historical fiction authors and see how they write the prose, how they work around the story, how they lay out the story. So, what authors would you say have been like big role models in your author voice and your author's journey?
I take myself back to my childhood, and I was lucky enough to go to a school where the English master gave us a reading list at the start of every term, and there were usually a dozen or so books on that list. And it was the classic boys' own style books that you'd expect you to read. Robinson Crusoe by Damien Defoe.
Right.
And I cherry-picked a few of them that I wanted to read. I'd never read Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore
Oh, okay, nice.
Awesome book. And I came back to it this year as part of World Book Day, and it was my pick as my favourite childhood story. But then as I grew up and grew older, I was lucky enough to do my exams around 1984, which I was doing essays on George Orwell's 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a good year to do your exams because there's quite a lot of information.
Yes.
At that time, and a film that had just come out with Richard Burton. So there was plenty to get my teeth into. As I've moved on and got older, certainly Sebastian Faulks is an author that I would aspire to. I think his writing style is superb. If people have ever read Birdsong, probably his most famous, which has I think also been adapted to a film or TV show, that's a fantastic piece of work. But he similarly seems to be able to switch to different styles and genres. He wrote a book called Engleby, which was a much darker piece. I identified with that. I thought that's really clever that you can switch, and maybe that's where I got the feeling that I could switch from one genre to another, or at least have a go at writing in a multi-genre type format. Adventure books growing up. Yeah, I read Wilbur Smith, I read Clive Cussler, Frederick Forsyth. They've all given me a feeling of they're stories that you can read in an afternoon or read on an aeroplane in one spot, but they distract you enough and they entertain you enough, and ultimately that's what I want to do. So yeah, they were great. I'll pick up authors and see where they're going. And what they're talking about. I think Lee Child's Jack Reacher series is
yes.
I think Ian Rankin's crime stories involving Rebus are superb. As an ex-police officer, I probably at some stage need to sit down and write a really good crime thriller, and maybe that's one up my sleeve. We shall see. But yeah, I got a few ideas, and I've probably got about 9 ideas always floating around in my head, 9 to 10 ideas about what I could do next. But those would probably be at the forefront of my my reading sort of idols, if you like, my heroes within them.
Nice. And I always like asking this question because I definitely think it is important for every author, any author especially, who wants to go into this field, to go down this path, to always see what books we generally like to read and see if we can get our hand in it. And now I'm going to ask you some questions, guy, about the business side, because I really think this is a very important discussion regarding the business side of being an author, especially an indie author. So when did you make the decision to go down the independent route? Did you want to initially go the traditional route, or did you always want to go the independent route after doing the research and just seeing if it would be the most suitable for you?
I tried the traditional route initially. I sent off, must have been 40 to 50 queries with the manuscript of my first novel, Dysfunction. And I got some really favourable feedback, but no pickups. And as much as we say, well, you take it on the chin, I firmly believe that with the industry as it is, you can have the most wonderful manuscript. You could be the next J.K. Rowling. You could be another very famous author with a fantastic, and you've got to have the luck to land that on the desk of an agent that's looking for new work, that's looking for work in that genre, that has enough time and space to give it what it wants. And the chances of doing that with the amount of work that's probably being submitted is pretty much, I should imagine, similar to winning the lottery. So I'm much more realistic now, and thought, well, I've still got a voice. I still think Dysfunction, my first novel, shines as a piece. I've had it read by several people, independent people who aren't friends who are going to necessarily blow smoke up my backside. I've got people that are going to say, it's okay. But some people said, no, I think it flies. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And that first one, I found an independent publisher, and we hybrid published. They put some money in, I put some money in, and we got it put together that way. I think I found the cover designer, and I found a proofreader, and we moved forward in that respect. And with the current one, the one that I've recently published with Indomitable, I was more inclined to self-publish, to go my own way. And I thought, well, people give Amazon a hard time, but I have to say, without Amazon's support and putting it up on the Amazon platform, I would really struggle. So I went with them. I went with them with a paperback and an ebook version. Maybe in years to come, I'll do an audio version. I've got to find somebody maybe to do it, or me, I'll do it. I don't know. But at the moment, paperback, Kindle version, do the decent thing and allow it to be free on Kindle Unlimited so that people can dip into it if they want to, if they have that facility. And at the moment, I think it gives me the opportunity to know exactly where I am with sales, day by day basis. And as I said, I'm not fixated. It had a good start. We're a month in. Things have naturally tailed off a little bit, but that's now down to me to understand and start to appreciate what I can do to keep my presence in the book world up there. Keep and try and get these books in the public eye, and to build my social media to such a degree that rather than 200 or 300, that I, in maybe 5 years' time, have, I don't know, 10, 20,000 people. Can't be unrealistic, but it may be that in one of my future books, I hit the ground running and I'm able to sort of build on what I've built since I started in 2022. So, sorry, go ahead, Gabriel.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I completely agree with everything you said. And I also think for people going down the independent route, you do have a lot more creative control. But I definitely think you'll probably agree, Guy, that the independent route does have drawbacks in the sense that it's you. You have to find the editor. You have to find the cover designer. You have to find a printing house. It's all on you. You have to be the one to promote it heavily. And you do have to think of it in the sense that it is like a business. You do have to be disciplined, be motivated. You do have to write. Now, it is a little bit better in a sense to traditionally publish. Not that there's anything wrong with authors who go down the traditionally publishing route. Congratulations to those, and kudos to those who go down that route and to great success. But there is a lot of, what was I going to say? A lot of consequences in the sense if your book doesn't sell. Because if the house realizes that you're not going to bring in money for them, they will drop you. And if your book is launched around the time of a specific trend in a genre, science fiction, fantasy, crime, thriller, whatever, and there are other books in that house that are selling more than you, you're also going to be dropped. So there's a lot of research that definitely goes into mind. And it also ties back into the audience. Like, what does the audience want to read? What are they more interested in? So for you, Guy, when you began writing your books, did you have an audience in mind, a reader in mind, or do you write your books in the sense that these are the books that you would want to read yourself if they were published by someone else?
Probably the latter, yes. I think I probably write the books, and now as I'm moving further into the industry, my understanding is now that I know probably what I think my audience is. I think I'm looking at probably emergency service personnel, maybe ex or current serving military personnel, probably people, men and women in their 40s, 50s,
Mm-hmm.
generation, maybe retired with a bit more time on their hands, people with a bit of life experience, certainly with regard to the historical one, that would appreciate and understand those times. Obviously, we're talking a long time ago now, but they may have
Right.
relatives that would have been through those periods of time in history. So I now I know kind of what my I think my audience is. It might possibly, as we go into the sort of the next few books, it might possibly change what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to write. I'm not going to suddenly write a romantic fiction. That's not me.
Right.
So, there are some I think are beyond me, and I also think the market's saturated, and there's more than enough
Mm-hmm.
authors that write fantastic romantic fiction, and I'm probably not going to dip my toe in the water of that particular genre.
Right.
But there's more than enough stuff for me to write, and I think there's more than enough of an audience for me to find people that would enjoy the books that I publish. And it will just be a case of, if I'm lucky enough to build on what I've got done so far, then I'm not ever going to be worried too much about that side of it. I'm going to try. I'm going to put the effort in. I'm going to engage and do as many of these sort of interviews as I can, because
Mm-hmm.
else it's really enjoyable to talk to people about writing
Right.
and to share my experiences, because I'd love for someone to turn around in years to come and say, "Oh, I saw Guy Robin interviewed, and it inspired me to go and write a book." That would be wonderful, because I honestly believe that I'm a fairly level-headed, normal, average chap who would love someone else to be able to do it. If I can do it, I think there's an awful lot of other people out there that could do it, and they just need a little push, a little nudge, just to get them going. That would be satisfying.
And that is a great answer. I absolutely love that. That motivates you. Like, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And which kind of leads into my next question. And we may have already touched about this earlier, how being an author, it is an amazing experience, but it's also a very lonely experience in the sense that you constantly work, sometimes late hours, putting words on a page and then constantly changing them, going through revision after revision. Some days we'll have burnouts. Some days we will not want to write. We may not have any motivation. And then we'll have those bleak moments and thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is this something that I actually want to do? And we'll have almost like a crisis of, should I really be doing this? Almost like what you said, imposter syndrome. Like, am I really an author to actually double my hand into this field when there are many other successful people? So for you, Guy, what motivates you to continue writing? What is your why?
I need to have something that is my next subject. So I was lucky enough, while my wife and I were considering our move to France, I had the time to sit down, and we were 6 months between houses living in rented accommodation. And I'd lost things like my computer. So I went old school, and I picked up my notebooks and my pens, and I literally penned those 20 poems that I'm telling you about.
Wow.
Literally. And what was motivating me? It was, there's a story here. Because it started off as just I think I might have been waiting for Paula to come out the hairdressers or something like that. I was in the car. I just wrote a poem in the car, and I looked at it and thought, oh, that's quite good. I'm quite proud of that. And I showed it to Paula. She says, yeah, that's not bad. And so I thought, oh, I'll write another one. And then every time I sort of had a moment, I literally became, when the car was being serviced and I'm sat in a coffee shop, I think I wrote a chapter in a coffee shop because it flowed, and I was sitting there watching the world go by, and I had this story, and that was motivating me. And so at the end of the one that we're going to publish next, there's that feeling of, oh, what am I going to do next? What's the next one going to be? So I took myself off for, we took ourselves off for a mini break.
Right.
Completely different environment, rest and relaxation. I think I was sat with my notebook by a pool, and it was lovely weather, and I thought, right, empty my mind and then think of some stories. And I had a pencil, and I sketched out a few ideas, and I think it came up with about 9 or 10. And number 7 is what I'm going to write next. And I'm really excited. I'm not going to give you anything away. I haven't even started. I've done the research or started the research. I haven't started the writing, but I'm really engaged by it because it's going to be set in France. That's well, I'm living here now. I might as well set it because I know the area and I know the place. So I'm understanding the place, and yeah, I feel really engaged, and that is how I go back to my desk and think, I understand the low moments. I understand that the block and not being able to get over that. You've got to, well, this is purely my opinion, you've got to, if it's not happening, don't force it. Just go off and do something else. We mentioned at the start, I've got lots of hobbies, lots of interests.
Mm-hmm.
I've been out for a 120-mile motorbike ride this morning.
Wow.
It'll be about 3 hours, just scooting around the back roads of France, and it was wonderful. The French roads are really quiet. There's hardly any traffic, and you just if you see another car, it's rare. So I just took myself off, and I was just clearing my head and I wasn't necessarily. I was just concentrating on riding. I didn't have anything else going on. I stopped occasionally I stopped for a coffee, took some pictures of my route, and I might post that as something on social media over the weekend as whatever.
Right.
Because that's what I learned to do now, is that experiences that I have, let people understand I'm not just a writer, but I've got lots of other things going on. But that can also feed into how I promote my books, because you give people a little bit of a story, and then you say, oh, by the way, if you want to know a little bit more, why not dig into one of my books and give them the link? And I'm sort of just learning little ways and little tricks. I'm sure you're exactly the same. You just find ways of original ways to try and sort of say, oh, by the way, I write books too.
I've done that as well. When people are like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I've written like 2 books. They've taken me like a while, but yeah, I have them up, and I 100%. Everything you said is very, very true. And I kind of leads into another thing, a little tangent, before we go into the last few questions, which is, in your opinion, when should a writer write and transfer the mindset from motivating themselves to write to now being disciplined writers? Because I had one of my guests say, if you're writing for motivation, it will not be your most authentic work, as opposed to if you are a disciplined writer and you commit yourself to, I'm going to have this book finished by a certain timetable. I'm going to present the most authentic version of myself.
Maybe somewhere in the middle. I don't like the idea of deadlines. I don't like the idea of myself. But that being said, when I'm I probably will try and write 1,000 words a session. So it's probably 1,000 words a day. And I will have a set part of the day that I set aside for writing, which is invariably the morning for me. That's when it gives me an opportunity to sit, mull over that first cup of coffee, and look at what I've written before, the day before, and then right, where are we going today? In the same vein, if I'm doing research or if I'm visiting locations, I'll map out where I want to go. I'll do the research so I can do it. If I can do the virtual research, that's fine. But there's nothing like visiting some of the actual locations to get the feel, because
Right.
you need the smell of a place. You need to feel. You don't get that with Google Maps or Street View.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes be there. So take, for example, this news story. It's probably going to be set down south of France, Pyrenees, up in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I know the mountains, the Pyrenees, fairly well, but we're going to have a bit of a trip down there next week. Just to, it's a nice couple of days away. It's a change of scenery. Paula gets a nice break. We get to see places, and I get to do a little bit of research. And it may also ping new ideas that I'll just file away, and that'll be on the back burner perhaps for future projects. Because everything that I do, I always say to my friends, don't tell me these things because I'll write about it.
Yes, that is true. That is probably the one thing about us authors. Our brains never shut off. We are constantly being inspired and getting little ideas from our everyday surroundings. Either we see something on TV, we hear something from a friend. It's like, ooh, that'll be a good idea. That's just like me. I have on my computer, I want to say maybe 3 stories I have to get to. One set during the American Revolution and the prequel during the French Indian Wars. Another which is a Viking fantasy story, and the other one which I'm currently writing, but it's taking me a long time to write, a Japanese samurai story during the late 1500s, and that's taking me a whole bunch of research to do. But that's the beautiful thing about us being writers. We love to write, and we're constantly writing all the time. And it's always good when we talk about our ideas with our friends and our inner circle, and they say, oh, that's a good idea. That really kind of like elevates ourselves in a sense. Like, we've found a good collection of people that are very supportive of us, which leads into the last 2 questions before the final question of the interview, guys. So who have been your biggest supporters in your life up to this point? And have you ever gotten a sense of validation from other independent authors who have read your book? Or do you not solely write for validation? You just write because you enjoy writing. And if someone picks up your book and gives their thoughts and gives your critique, is like, oh, that's nice, because it's one thing to write a story and present it on the digital stage. It's another thing entirely to have another author or someone in the same genre that you're writing in to look at it and say, this is where you belong.
So I'll answer that in 2 parts.
All right.
The first part, when I was researching Indomitable, this grand historic based on my grandfather, I discovered through an ancestry site relatives I never knew I had, part of my grandfather's extended family and their children, and we've connected as a result of that research, and they have been incredibly supportive of that work. And it's like, so I wrote a book, and it was well received, but in addition to that, I've discovered new family that I never knew I had. So that's incredible in itself. And they, in turn, have been really, really supportive of everything that I've done. And I suspect will be supportive of anything I do in the future, because we're now firm friends, we're family, and they know I'm an author. In fact, we've invited them to come and see us in France, which I hope they will do later this year.
Nice.
With regard to other authors, I want to give a massive shout out to someone called Aaron Ryan. Aaron writes dystopian fiction, and out of the blue, we connected on LinkedIn, and he was really complimentary about my debut, Dysfunction, and showed a screen grab of the fact that he bought a copy. He then incredibly kindly wrote a really, really detailed and thorough and positive review of it. And I, in turn, have read his, the first of his trilogy, Dissonance. And I can see that Aaron and I have an awful lot in common. And so two complete strangers on different sides of the pond have connected as a direct result of the fact that we're both independent authors. And I happen to have written a dystopian story. And Aaron, I think that's what Aaron writes. As I say, it's a trilogy of his books that I'm going through at the moment. And I very much look forward to seeing what he comes up with next. But yeah, for as far as I'm concerned, a big shout out for him, because he feels like me in the United States, if you know what I mean. An American,
right?
Same sort of feelings towards the industry, same sort of writing, and yeah, I definitely have a lot of time for what he puts out, and I'll always support now what I see him doing, and I think that's what an independent author should be doing ultimately.
Awesome. And now we've reached the final question, Guy. And as I said, I don't know like how I'm gonna ask you this, because you probably may have already answered this before, because you've given like great answers to this one question. And the final question is, Guy, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors out there, fellow independent authors, or people who want to get into this field of writing, to dip their toe in and see if this is something that they want to be a part of?
Don't be dissuaded by people that say and feel that they know you. One of the things that struck me when I started was that a lot of the people that knew me when I was a young serving police officer or a school person or a schoolboy, I think when they reconnect with you 40 years later, they see you as that same person. They don't think, we forget when we meet people that these people have progressed. They're different. Their life experiences are completely different to that person that you knew all those years ago. So everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has the ability to create something that's very much theirs, because everybody's life experiences are unique. I would say don't be overawed by it. Don't feel shy about saying I'm writing, I'm sitting down to write. Just keep plugging away. Don't get dejected. The industry can be harsh. I do watch times on Twitter and feel that there's an awful lot of problems that people to express on Twitter, and I feel quite sorry that maybe there's a lot of mental illness as a result of the disappointments that some authors receive.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of cruelty as well. So you've got to try and be thick-skinned. Isn't the right word, although having a thick skin helps. I think you've got to be quite resilient. I think you've got to be realistic. Yes. I think you've got to be positive. Take everything that happens and try and put a positive spin on it. Try and take the negativity that you might have, remove that, and turn it into a positive. That positive energy will really help when you sit down and just feel that you can do this. And it doesn't matter. This is my opinion. I don't think it matters how long it might take you. It doesn't matter how much you might do or not do on any given day. Don't set yourself goals that make it really difficult. Just say, I'm going to do this, and I'll just get to it. And then you'll gradually find the parameters that you want to work within, and you'll find what's comfortable for you as the author. For me, it's 1,000 words a day. For you, it might be 2,000. It might be 250. We're each making our own rules because so you have the ability to choose what you want to set up as your goals and the framework within which you work. But just keep plugging away. Don't feel dejected. You'll get support from your family. You'll get support from your friends, and just keep going and keep smiling. And don't forget that there's other things in the world that you can occupy. Don't become too blinkered, because everything else that we do will feed into how you are as a writer. Because all those life experiences that you do and all the things and hobbies and interests that you have outside of writing that actually becomes quite useful when you sit down,
Yes.
because you've got so much in your head to talk about, ultimately. And I think that's where I'd go with it, Gabriel.
Awesome. And also something to add to that too, as you said, about don't be rejected and don't like be muggered down or anything. I remember one author who I had on the show talked about when writing the book, when you make your debut novel, you think that, oh, this is going to be the book that's going to, make me famous or get my name out. That's not always the case. And that's a hard pill to swallow, that it may not be the first book that people know you for. It may be your seventh book, which in the case of Natalie Wright, the author who I interviewed, her famous book that she's known for now is Season of the Dragon. That's her seventh book. But the good thing about that is, because people know her for Season of the Dragon, they now know the other works that show the progress of her as an author. And that you have to see the positive in that, to see that growth. And if you can recognize that, if you can adapt it to your own life and see that there is a positive down the road that you can write, and that one book that you write, which is probably like your fifth or sixth or 10th book, and that's what you're known for, well, now you have a huge audience to explore, because, hey, you can tell them, I have like 9 books for you to check out. And that, I think, is the truest thing for being an indie author, is persevere and never give up. And with that, listeners, this will be a perfect spot to end this wonderful and very insightful interview. I want to thank our guest, Guy Robbins, for joining us today. Guy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Gabriel, thank you very much for having me. I very much look forward to talking with you again sometime in the future.
Definitely, Guy. But before we officially end today, where can people find your books, and are there any social medias that you would like to share for people to reach out and connect with you and stuff like that?
Well, obviously, I write as Guy Robin. You can find my books on Amazon under Guy Robin as the author. I have social media platforms. I'm on LinkedIn as Guy Robin. I'm on Instagram as Guy Robin _author. I'm on Facebook as Guy Robin author. I'm on X as @Guy Robin _author. And I've just embarked on Threads, part of the Instagram platform. And I'm on there as Guy Robin _author as well. So I'm busy building my following, building an audience. You can find me. I welcome your engagement. Follow me. If you want to ask me a question, I'd certainly answer your questions if you have any.
And I will link all those down below in the description of this video for you to follow Guy on all the social media platforms, as well as links to his book to go and check them out and purchase a copy and leave a review. That's the biggest thing about us indie authors. We love reviews, because reviews help us. They help bring exposure to our works, and they help us bring us notoriety in the independent publishing world. And thank you also very much for joining us today. Again, a huge thank you to our guest, Guy Robbins, for joining us. Guy, again, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the show.
Thanks again, Gabriel. Take care, look after yourself, and I hope to speak to you soon.
And listeners, until next time, this has been The Wandering Quill and The Wandering Scribe signing out. We'll see you all in the next episode. Like and subscribe.